it's such a difficult conversation to have because there's so much uncertainty. And I just want to make sure people understand and don't feel like you're uninformed or that things are happening that you can't wrap your head around, because in that sense you're not alone. I'm Pete Sadera, I'm the editor-in-chief of Sourcing Journal. So I'm in the journalism business, and there's been multiple nights in the last 2 months when we've been working on a story at 10 o'clock at night, get the story published at 10:30, we're like, oh man, we're working overtime over here, and then wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and it's completely inbound. And it was a fruitless endeavor. That's happening to all of us. So what can we do? What can we try to see coming? And how can we best prepare our businesses to deal with that? That's what we'll really try to get at to the bottom of today. I will say, in an optimistic note, I've been in and around the retail, fashion industry for 30 years, and if there's one thing, it's resilient. The businesses are resilient, the people that work in it are resilient. There's always a problem. It seems like the last 10 years there have been more, but it's always been, whether it was to switch to .com, and then everything was omni-channel, and then what's the future of the stores, and now we have tariffs, and then there was COVID. We're still here. And one other thing that's resilient is particularly U.S., but customers. There's an insatiable appetite for shopping. There's an insatiable appetite for newness. Social media has drastically changed the speed that trends are happening, and the trends are changing, and the need for must-haves. It's not seasonal, it's weekly. So as long as those things go on, yes, this is like an inconvenient roadblock we have to deal with, but I do think it's not an insurmountable one, and I do think that our industry can continue to thrive despite these challenges. So I am not the expert on these challenges. I have 3 experts with me today, so we can get their outlook, and then we'll have some time for Q&A, and we'll hopefully all leave a little bit more enlightened than we started. So Ed, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what your area of expertise is.
So hi, my name is Ed Gribbin. I've been in the industry for almost 50 years now. I think I've had every possible job you could have in the apparel and textile industry. For 14 years, I was president of a company called Alvanon. You may have heard of Alvanon or used Alvanon's fit consulting or tools. I left Alvanon in 2018 to start Gribbin Strategic, and I do mostly supply chain work right now, helping people find opportunities to nearshore or take advantage of U.S. trade agreements to diversify their sourcing. And I served for 14 years now on the board of the American Apparel and Footwear Association. I'm on the board and executive committee of the International Apparel Federation, and I serve on AAFA's Trade Policy and Customs Committee, as well as our Environmental Committee. So I get to go to Washington. I'm going to Washington next Tuesday to spend a day on the Hill lobbying legislative staff on the importance of some of our trade preference programs. Inevitably, the topic of tariffs will come up. The challenge in Congress, and what I'll hear from Dems and Republicans on Ways and Means and Senate Finance next Tuesday, is that our hands are tied. You know, this is all being driven by the White House. This is not being driven by us. And if you just follow the press, you'll see that the Republicans in Congress do not want to get in the way of the Trump administration. So they're going to basically rubber stamp anything that comes down the pike and say, yeah, this is what's going to happen. And to Pete's point, I think the only thing that's really helpful in all of this is that uncertainty means it might happen and it might not happen. So as of this morning, you know, the Trump administration says that 25% on Mexico and Canada is going to happen Monday. And I wouldn't be surprised Sunday night or early Monday morning to hear something different. It's interesting how companies that are relying on, it's not so much apparel and textile. Apparel and textile does not rely on Canada very much. It does rely on Mexico to some degree, but the people who are sourcing in Mexico are already developing mitigation strategies. So I think the impact immediately is not going to be felt, even if it does happen there. I think the big red flag is China, especially for this industry. technical expertise in both textiles and trims and garment manufacturing in China in the intimates industry is second to none. And the fact that it's a one-stop shop, everything is in nearby, it makes the sourcing decision so much easier. Now 10% tariffs on China in addition to the existing tariffs. And by the way, this time there's no exclusionary process, so you can't apply for an exclusion even if you think you have a product that can't be made here. So the 10% people are going to get away with. It's the 60% that's going to have a huge impact. So I'm sure we'll talk about other things during the course of this hour, but the mitigation strategy for the big guys like Walmart and Target, they're already well out of China and not reliant on China, except maybe for footwear. But the rest of this industry really is reliant on China. So I think we'll come back to that in the course of our hour here.
Thanks, Ed. There's a lot of good things we could touch on there. Troy?
Yeah, my name is Troy Wiley. I'm with Imperative Logistics. I actually got into logistics and supply chain management back in the 90s. I tried to start my own garment importer from Latin America and came across same kinds of issues that you guys are facing today, which was tariffs and it was actually anti-dumping out of Argentina that I was facing. But my relationships were there and sparked my interest in international trade and logistics, and I've been doing it for about 34 years now. It's a dynamic environment. We're all living in right now, and it's everybody's like Ed alluded to. It's anybody's guess what's going to happen next, right? One day we hear about 25% tariffs from Europe, which was just yesterday, and then they actually pushed back the they pushed back the Mexico and Canada stuff to I thought it was April 4th. Just to get them aligned on the border. I think somebody was talking about placing troops on the border. It's just anybody's guess what's going to happen next, right? So from our side, it's keep calm, carry on. We have to keep pressing on and doing the same thing until it's signed, sealed, and delivered. It's not official, right? And so that's kind of our MO right now is just to keep doing what we can to mitigate any kind of frenzy, buying from overseas, right? Last time this happened in 2018, a lot of people tried to, kind of preload the tariffs, right, with freight, and freight in return spiked. So a lot of these companies that tried to preload their tariffs paid additional price in tariff and freight charges, and then may or may not have got hit by tariffs as well. So it really hurt a lot of industries. Just the panic buying, right? And now, aside from tariffs, there is rumors of possible surcharge on Chinese vessels, which affects about 30% of the entire fleet of the world. So it's a pretty substantial amount, which is aside from tariffs, it's going to affect every single product that comes into the United States. This has kind of a ripple effect out to Canada, right? Because everybody wants to avoid this. It's $1.5 million is what they're talking about per vessel sailing. So per port call in the United States, $1.5 million. And you aggregate that over a couple thousand containers, and that's what your THC, your terminal handling charges, are going to go up to, right? So this is on top of tariffs already. So I guess my point is there's so many different variables right now. Until it's signed, we're not going to create panic. What I can encourage each and everybody that does import from overseas is to develop a personal relationship with an in-person broker, a licensed customs broker that knows harmonized tariff codes and knows how to help you to classify products, not just on the harmonized tariff code, but also on a SKU level. If you're classifying on a SKU level, then if you're changing your supply chain over and you're managing all the way through from your PO level all the way through, then when the United States government, because it's not just about tariffs and duties, they go back to fair trade practices, right? So if you're supplying and they come back to you, if you suddenly change your supply chain and go to a supply that they don't necessarily approve of, they'll come back and ask you for the paper trail to qualify where you're supplying out of, down to raw materials. So I would highly encourage you to partner up with a broker that knows how to do that. We as an operation are using AI as kind of a tool, but it's not the primary tool. The primary tool is people and that interaction. We have to have that dialogue.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from a lot of that is just staying agile, not trying to get out in front of it and just react. Being a little bit reactive, which is not something that we're super comfortable with. Frederic?
Yes, my name is Frederic Blanchard. So I'm not an expert on tariffs as you know, but I'm a part of the solution. I founded an accounting firm back in 2006, helping European companies to come in the US for in the fashion and cosmetic industry. So fashion is really a big part of our practice, and obviously, especially with the announcement yesterday, our clients are in the panic mode, as you mentioned, and I don't think you should, but in any case, there are options and possibilities to kind of limit the impact of tariffs, and the part of the solution will be eventually considering the setup of a US-based subsidiary in the US when you're already done set up yet in the US, meaning when you sell directly from your home country. Yeah, so I'm very at the same time, I'm very happy to listen to what you have to say about impact, but I also believe that there are many of the solution, accounting solution, tax solution that we can look at together, and that's what I'm here today.
Thanks, Frederic. Yeah, we'll tap into some of those solutions a little bit later on. And what's the baseline? Uncertainty, that's the theme of the day. So something's happening, you don't know what. Particularly with the audience here, we're working with intimates, we're working with performance wear. Given that category for the Lions on very specific things, it's not so easy to just jump to one locale to another. What's the advice there?
Yeah, I think there's, unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of great advice. I think that the one thing that I've seen happen over the course of time in other segments of the apparel industry is that when people realize, like when cotton prices spiked 15 years ago, and then wages went up on every 5-year plan in China, people started looking at, a China plus one strategy. And that might have worked out for a little while. And then we had UFLPA and the Uyghur cotton situation. And so more fear about sourcing in China. And again, prices keep going up. So most mainstream retailers and brands have diversified to a significant degree out of China already. There are a couple of industries. I did a project for a women's dress company, does women's special occasion dresses, mother of the bride dress, that type of thing. Their entire supply chain is in and around Shanghai. And I did a research project for them where I tried to find alternates for them. But the level of intricacy with lace, with beading, with specialty fabrics, specialty trims, was next to impossible. There's no infrastructure anywhere outside of China to be able to move that entire supply chain. So what they were able to do was convince their major supplier to invest in infrastructure facilities in Vietnam, and they started doing this 5 years ago and are almost to the point where they can produce vertically in Vietnam what they were producing in Shanghai. And I would encourage this industry to think about who are your key suppliers, and are they willing to look at not just tariffs, forget tariffs for a minute, look at the geopolitical landscape that we're in. Look at what the administration is doing, cozying up to Russia. What do you think Xi Jinping thinks when he looks at Taiwan, and starts drooling a little bit? So I think that the geopolitical situation is scary, and we're going to be wrapped up in it, but it's not going to make it easy if we shut the borders to everything coming out of China. But if you have reliable suppliers, think about getting those suppliers to verticalize their supply chain in safer areas. There's a lot of uncertainty about trade preference programs getting renewed. GSP, as you know, has 4 years now, has not been renewed. But again, on the Hill, there's bipartisan support to renew GSP. There's bipartisan support for AGOA and for Haiti Hope, both of which expire September 30th of this year. Look at Africa. If you can get your suppliers to think about building skill sets in Africa at least, and in Haiti, Haiti's a little tougher, but in Africa, they're not going to restrict third country inputs. So you can still get your fabrics and trims from China. One of my clients manufactures in Tanzania and Madagascar. Most of their fabrics come from China. They're sophisticated technical textiles for the athletic industry. There's no infrastructure for that in Africa. But the renewal of AGOA, which we believe will happen, will grandfather in third country inputs. So think about that as an alternative. I think that there's merit in looking at Africa as an alternative, relying on your current suppliers for fabrics and trims, and getting your supplier to train a workforce in a different country.
Just one question, if I may just jump on what you just said, is shifting your production origin is actually what the plan could be. But it's a very long-term investment. It's kind of, it's assuming that the tariff will stay as they are beyond the administration, the actual administration. Would it be like any other option that would require less investment in terms of like switching completely the production line?
If you're making T-shirts, no investment necessary. You know, open up shop tomorrow morning. If you're making intimate apparel, much more complicated.
Yeah, I will say, that was the first solution of the day, but it's a long-term one, 10 to 15 years maybe. But also with the tariffs, these were implemented in the first go. A lot of these tariffs were implemented in the first go-round of this administration, and they stayed even through the second administration, the intermediate administration. So it's probably best to plan for what we have versus what they have been. I would like to touch on a couple of things you said in your introduction, Troy. One, you said you've been doing this for 30, 40 years. That's impossible. But second, you were talking about the importance of having personal relationships. I like the way that you mentioned AI, but that's a buzzword right now. But talking to people and having relationships is going to be more crucial than it ever has been going forward. Could you expand a little on that?
Yeah, absolutely, and I have to agree with that. It's like you got to figure out your supply chain. Let me just touch on that real quick. And they take tariffs out of the conversation for a minute because tariffs are comprehensive. Like now, there's no such safe space, right? Unfortunately, now everybody's getting 25%. It looks like there's reciprocal tariffs even into Europe. There's a lot of different variable factors that are involved. And you really have to make sense for your own business what's going to be best in terms of your supply chain, right? On to AI, and there's a lot of talk of implementing AI as kind of a replacement for the human interaction that we have as the customer service, and brokers, those kinds of things. What we do as an interpersonal relationship cannot be replaced by machines right now. I mean, there's just we understand your product. I mean, there's companies that actually get in, roll up our sleeves, and understand your product and how to work with a garment importer. AI is simply as a kind of back office function to cross-check all of the harmonized tariff codes and make sure that the tariffs are in place appropriately. Now, we are using AI to, if there were like an exclusion, to quickly be able to pull those classifications out of whatever entry and refund you the money as quickly as possible. That's the primary function of what we're using AI for. It's not the interface with the customer. It's a back office function. And quite honestly, we found that sometimes outsourcing to places like India or Philippines is just as effective.
The key point would be, as things are uncertain, having an actual personal relationship with someone that can actually walk you through things.
They can pivot exactly in today's volatile.
Well, Frederic, the expertise of Ed and Troy is largely US-based companies. You're much more familiar with the European market. As Troy mentioned, all of a sudden out of nowhere, there's maybe 25, but maybe not out of nowhere, but there's now 25% tariffs coming to Europe. What's their perspective from that viewpoint?
First of all, many companies were considering the possibility to develop their brand, let's say, in the US, and dealing with all the development from their own country, from France, from Germany, from Italy. Saying, you know what, I don't need to set up a US subsidiary, I just sell directly from Milano, from Paris, and and I bring the money back to my own country. But nowadays, you get hit by 25% tariffs. So the question is, should we accept it and then raise prices? Is the market able to accept such an increase? Probably not. So the US-based subsidiary is a way to eventually sell your same product to your US-based subsidiary at a lower price, and for that US-based company, to sell to your customers in the US and generating a margin in the US. By doing so, you will obviously send the product directly to the US at a lower amount and apply the tariffs, 25% on the lower amount. We still have many issues with this, because obviously that would sound very simple. I just send for $1, something that I used to sell for $100, and I'm paying my tariffs of $1. Happy, problem resolved. You can't, obviously. Why? Because we have issues with transfer pricing, meaning like, now today we're talking about tariffs, but in parallel of tariff issues, you also have the tax issues, the corporate tax, the taxes that you pay to your country on the profit you realize on that sale. So technically, if I take my example, I say for $1 to the US subsidiary, pay on my tariffs of $1, and then generate $99 of profit in the US. What do you think the Italians government or the French government would say? They say, no way, we need our share of the cake, So you have to follow some rules of transfer pricing and find the right price to send the product to the US sub without generating any tax issues, but still controlling your tariffs that you're going to pay on that transfer. And that's going to be a game that many of these companies are considering now. Obviously, the news is, even if we're expecting it, it didn't come like this. We were expecting, an increase of tariffs. We had it on certain industry, in the wine industry, in the wine and spirit from France at the first Trump administration. But the US-based company is actually a way to kind of limit the risk on a very short-term basis. More long-term, strategy would be indeed to shift your production lines.
What about using things like free trade zones? Is that something?
True, yeah, you could if you actually re-export them down the road. But I mean, when the market is in the US, obviously it may have some limitations. Some people also would say, too, and that more what Troy could confirm, is instead of sending the finished product directly to your market, maybe to actually send raw materials and have it assembled in the US with partnership with US companies. So there are ways to kind of limit the cost, Troy, but I guess.
Yeah, especially on FTZ imports. FTZs are set up, obviously, in the US for raw material imports to come into a warehouse where you can bond them in a bonded warehouse, and then use them as needed, so you don't have to pay duty or taxes up front, right? And then if you don't utilize that raw material, you can re-export it, you can do whatever you want to with it, but it's a less cost of
it's immediate
costs.
Yeah, hopefully that's not a little bit too in the weeds, because it is pretty technical, but this is the landscape that we're dealing with now.
And as you said at the beginning, Peter, it's like the market is still very attractive. I mean, we are facing some tax issues right now, which will be handled in a way or another. But the market, I mean, the US economy is still the strongest right now. When you go to Europe, people are suffering, struggling. The US is still, very important for the companies and the brands to come and develop their activities here.
Ed, I just want to touch on one subset of, it's not really a subset of tariffs, but it's a similar levy, is the de minimis loophole, which 10 years ago people may have been using, but it was not part of our lexicon when we talked about shipping. A lot of people here, or an industry in general, are drop shipping now. And basically, you could ship something from overseas that's less than $800 direct to the consumer with no duties, no tariffs. It was closed for 27 hours, maybe 3 weeks ago, and now it's back, but it does seem to have bipartisan support to do some change to this. How concerned with people who are using this as part of their business, how concerned should they be?
So maybe a show of hands, how many people represent a direct-to-consumer brand here? So how many of you take advantage of de minimis today? So on both sides of the aisle in Congress, there is a relatively strong anti-China sentiment. And with what Shein and Temu have done over the past 5 years, has gotten people in Congress ready to put legislation forth that would end de minimis, or radically alter it. The most popular one right now is a bill that would take away de minimis privileges from any country that's faced with 301 tariffs, so the 2018 tariffs that Trump placed on China. So it's eliminating Shein and Temu and anyone from China from using the de minimis advantage. It's something that everyone needs to think about, because I think it's going to go away or be modified radically if you're taking advantage of it now. I was with the chief operating officer from Fabletics in December on the Hill, and they are a strong U.S. brand that takes advantage of about 75% of their business is de minimis business out of a warehouse in Tijuana. And this woman was scared to death that, this was going to happen. And they started mitigating as much as they could in December, saw the de minimis cancel and then be reinstated. And by the way, our last meeting of the Trade Policy Committee, we heard from Customs and Border Protection that they basically said if we end de minimis, with the resources that they have, there's no way they could inspect 4 million packages a day and look at 4 million HTS codes and inspect those items. Now, the majority, 75% of supposedly of de minimis shipments are apparel, textile, footwear related. And the Customs and Border Protection, part of Homeland Security, is very concerned about the number of packages that do get inspected and the amount of fentanyl that is found coming in and the amount of guns that are found coming in. So it's more than a statistical blip on the schedule. So there is legitimate concern about inspecting these shipments as well, but there's no manpower to do it. So if Trump decides Monday that, you know what, de minimis is off the table, customs you have to inspect all of those packages now, there's just no way they have the manpower to do that. We're minimum 60 to 90 days away from having an infrastructure in place to do that. So my advice would be, if you're using de minimis, don't expect to use it forever. I do believe it's going to be modified significantly, or it will go away, whether it's the administration or whether it's Congress. And I would take steps to look at how I get that product to my customer and minimize the impact to my direct customer on paying duty on that product.
Yeah, a lot of the advice that I'm getting from you is really risk management. I just try to mitigate things as much as I can, decrease exposure to one particular region or one particular way of shipping or one particular form of customs entry. It seems to be the best we can do right now. Troy, again, we're talking to like a very specific subset of the apparel and textile offering. When you're dealing with like importing delegates and specialty trims, there are challenges that they're facing that, when Ed said earlier, if you're just making a t-shirt, you can move tomorrow. That this industry needs to be a little bit more aware of.
Everybody in today's market is manufacturing critical goods. It doesn't matter if you're manufacturing instruments or automotives. It's all pretty much the same baseline of tariffs and the same baseline of challenges. The unique challenges that you face is in where you're going to actually set up your supply chain going forward, right? And and that is you're more versatile and more probably a little bit more bulletproof than some industries because there's just not automotive foundry everywhere in the world, right? It's, not everybody can manufacture anything. It's really there was also rumors of privatizing the U.S. Postal Service, so that could throw another whole caveat to this entire conversation. But I think you guys are, in this industry in particular, is very robust. Very, you guys have a lot more versatility than a lot of industries do.
So, Frederic, do you feel like there is, do you feel to Troy's point that does everybody in the same boat, or is there geographic regions that might be better off, sectors that might be better off?
It's very difficult to say at that stage because obviously it seems like, as you say, everything is everything is on the table with the same treatment. On the other hand, the experience has shown also that it will be, in Canada, has a different treatment for energy production. I think at 10%, if I'm not mistaken, while the rest will be 25%. So it may be a negotiation on a case-by-case basis at some point where industries will defend their own position, and that creates another issue actually for Europe. I'm sorry to focus on Europe mainly, but that's the one I know a little bit, is how the European countries are going to accept that negotiation, this unity negotiation. Are they going to go by themselves? I know that the Italians, for example, have a very strong lobby in the industry to actually get what they want, better than the French. Are they going to be able to say, let's join forces and negotiate at the same level? Or is it going to be probably the end of Europe to go that point and say, now it's everybody on his own, and we're going to negotiate directly with the US on an individual basis? I think right now it's very difficult to say. We don't know if it's only, I won't say a bluff, but more a way to negotiate down the road. Is the administration really enforcing all these 25% for European countries, for Canada, Mexico? For how long are they going to be? We don't know yet, I think. But right now you're right. It's everybody in the same boat.
Troy, is there any creative strategies or any ways that Blanchard are using to mitigate these rising costs that you know of?
It's again, keep calm and carry on. I think some of this stuff is going to, I think, and I'm not going to be a fortune teller here, but there's some of these things you'll have to let settle, let the dust settle before making major dramatic moves, right? There's so many balls in the air right now. Just by example, 2 days ago they announced the European tariffs. I talked to some colleagues, they were like, oh yeah, it's going to be based on the duty, which is very different. So, for example, if I'm sending a product into France, maybe they're charging 6% duty, right, for example. The United States was going to reciprocate that tariff at 6% on the same value commodity. And then come to find out the following day, it was going to be 25%, which is basically VAT, which is what you pay to import the goods into France or Germany or any European nation, plus the duty. So that 25% is basically goes back in the European countries is 20 to 23%, depending on the country, right? So it's so dynamic. And they don't know how this whole thing is going to play out economically either. And I say they by whatever. So I think maybe they could, I wouldn't bank on it, but they could potentially walk some of these things back when they see real severe economic impacts. So I think, try to be as calm and collected as possible and keep moving forward with your business. And I think Ed has a really good point about find out a market that's going to be good for you to manufacture in going forward, for you to supply out of, as opposed to just basing your decision solely on tariffs. Because a lot of this hype hopefully will settle and somebody will be focused on something else.
Just talking about this hemisphere, there's not a lot of infrastructure for intimate apparel in Catholic yard at this point. But you don't have to look too far. We have a free trade agreement with Colombia, and there's a huge intimates business and swimwear business in Colombia. So they've figured out how to build it. Maybe go down and study that. And I know sourcing from Colombia is not the same as sourcing from China. but they have built infrastructure. They have built trims and fabrics and the ability to produce a product that can come into the U.S. duty-free thanks to our free trade agreement with Colombia. And I know a lot of people would be sitting here saying, it's too expensive for me to source there. But look at the model and look at, can we get that model replicated with a reliable supplier in Honduras or in Guatemala or in El Salvador? Because I believe that that's possible.
Thanks. I do want to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions of the panelists. While we have them, we'll actually get what expertise we can have them. But before that, I just want to make sure if you have any closing remarks, if there's anything we haven't touched on that you think is relevant.
I mean, I'm probably going to repeat a little bit what we say, but the US market is strong, there is a strong economy, and as you say, the focus should not be on, tariffs, yes, we'll find ways, maybe, again, we don't know how long it's going to last, we don't know if it's going to be a permanent situation, and if it is, you have plenty of options, as you say, there's countries where you have less of that issue. So I don't talk much about the tax and the US-based companies, but for the companies that are actually selling directly from their own country to the US, I think that's clearly a very easygoing, fast, quick answer to the issue, at least temporary. And I would be more than happy to answer a question about that aspect if you want, because that's really something that I may do for other companies.
Thanks. Sure.
I share your sentiment. It's just we got to keep moving forward, and not to be redundant, but it's you can't focus exclusively on tariffs because there was a rumor of a tariff out of Colombia too, not too long ago because somebody wouldn't allow landing rights for an aircraft. So if you're constantly focused on the news feed, you're going to be distracted from your main goal, and that is just basically your products manufacturing.
Well, you've heard this, and you've read it in the press, and you've heard it on the news, but tariffs are a tax on the American consumer. And you can see right now with consumer sentiment in the United States how we are, we're pulling back a little bit. We're concerned. The market has not been doing well for the last week. We're anticipating that this could be very bad for us if inflation spikes because of this. And that being said, four people have Trump's ear on this subject. One is Kevin Hassett, one is Stephen Miller, and the other two are a little more scary. But Peter Navarro is still in Trump's ear, and Robert Lighthizer is in Trump's ear. And all four of those collectively believe that trade deficits of any type are bad. And we have huge trade deficits with who? Canada, Mexico, China. And so they're the easy targets for Trump. But trade deficits are not necessarily bad. We have USMCA, which regulates what I think are very productive trade deficits in the automotive industry, and in the farming industry, in the lumber industry in this country. I think that if you look at what happened with Colombia, he negotiated a settlement for something he wanted that was not tariff related, a political solution. And if you look at what happened on February 4th with Mexico and Canada, he backed off, 30-day delay. As long as the president and the administration want to use tariffs for political purposes and not to raise money to reduce the deficit, which is going to be impossible, I think we can just sit back and it's like watching everything else that happens in this administration, chaos. It'll be just that, it'll be chaos. But it won't necessarily mean something to your bottom line if they use tariffs strategically for either political gains or political punishment.
Good point. All right, I'd like to open up the floor to questions.
Sub-Saharan Africa provides duty-free importation of products from, I think it's down to 30 countries now in Sub-Saharan Africa, and it's going to be 29 once they kick South Africa out. And not that we're importing any apparel textiles from South Africa, but because of that trade preference program, and there's a similar trade program in Haiti, there's only one really relatively safe place to produce in Haiti, and that's on the Dominican border. But Haiti is still a very dangerous place. But the trade preference programs do not restrict third country inputs. So you can use fabrics and trims from your existing suppliers. There's a very large manufacturer of a brand, a well-known brand, a fast-growing brand of scrubs in this country that is looking at Africa now so they can use they don't want to change their fabric. It's like a really special fabric that they're getting from China, and they want to keep that fabric, but they can make it in Africa and it'll still be duty-free. So those are two programs that are set to expire on September 30th of this year. Both have bipartisan support in the Senate and the House to renew them. There's Senator Raphael Warnock of Georgia is probably going to put a bill in next week, a standalone bill to renew Haiti local treaty. There's no one in Congress who would vote against Haiti, so that'll pass. And the Trump administration, because Marco Rubio is a big supporter of that treaty, the Trump administration sign it. Africa's a little more suspect because there are third country inputs. Representative Jason Smith, who chairs the House Ways and Means Committee, is a real anti-China kind of guy, and he's asked the question of our committee multiple times. Now wait a minute, if the third country fabrics are coming from China into Africa, aren't we helping China? And the answer is really no. China doesn't want to be in that business anyway, supplying fabrics to someone else. If you look at the investment that's going into Africa, it's Chinese investment. So they're saying, we know the handwriting's on the wall. Our people want better paying jobs in electronics and in other industries. Let's move this apparel stuff to Africa. Let's invest in the infrastructure there. They're going to beat us to the punch if we don't renew these trade preference agreements. So again, back to it's not just about tariffs or taxes. It's also geopolitical. So say you you went to Paris for the weekend and you wanted to buy some stuff and you wanted to bring it back into the country. You're allowed to bring in $800 worth of product from outside the country, and it's duty-free. You don't have to pay any duty. If you bought a $1,000 handbag, you have to declare $200, and you have to pay duty on that $200 you want to put it at the airport. They've taken that same principle and applied it to e-commerce shipments. So if you buy something from another country that's under $800 in value in a day, and they look at one address, one person in one day. So you have up to $800 you can bring in duty-free. And it bypasses the normal Customs Border Protection process whereby they have a formal entry or an informal entry, and they collect duty on that product. So if it's less than $800, duty-free. And there are a lot of people in this industry who are taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I will add that it's not, the company does not have to be based in China, it's just that a shipment coming from China. So there's a lot of stuff you're already getting, like a lot of the things that you're getting are coming through this process. Any other questions?
Yeah, with advancements in like software or web, how feasible would you say that for any manufacturer out there in America to actually use? Especially like a lot of the products are made using machinery now, like implements for example, so you're just trying to understand
Yeah, I mean, I can say that I've had conversations with a lot of customers about this, and as Ed was talking about, industry, it's very involved. Like the beading work sometimes, and the lace, and the actual physical labor goes into making some things. We don't have the infrastructure here in the U.S. Really to handle that kind of manufacturing. Just taking a quick cross section of customers I've spoken to in the last 4 years, they've told me 3 to 5 years to set up like infrastructure that would support actually even just basic garment industry. And then you're talking about raw materials, where you're sourcing your raw materials, and then you start talking about specialty laces and stuff like that. You're still getting duty on the raw materials. So unless you're sourcing your cotton here and then manufacturing all the way through, you're still going to have some exposure.
That would also add a big cost of the final garment or anything, even the labor cost. And you're dealing with countries that are, it's probably somewhere between $2 and $3 a day for labor, and minimum wage is $17 an hour. So that's going to be a big difference. Any other questions?
ETD. Normally it's based on ETD as far as the implementation, and ETA as far as the actually did.
Any other questions? SourcingJournal.com. That was a layup. Yeah, I think the takeaway for me is that it really is moving fast. I mean, I talked about the minimus was gone for 27 hours, and then they were using the formal entry thing, which meant everything had a $21, $23 charge. So you bought something that cost $1, but it cost $23 to get in. That lasted about 4 hours. It's really hard to say. I think long term, we used to talk even 5 years ago, the world has gotten, the geopolitical world has gotten a lot less stable. So the China plus one, and when things have been talked about finding new places,